Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today, welcome back Michael, who's one of our head of research on our fantastic team, who's been pumping out plenty of content for all our members, and he's just returned from Token 2049 in Singapore. We've been enjoying getting all the goss from the very front lines, and this was an amazing conference. I think there was 10,000 attendees, 300 exhibitions, and 400 side events, and some really big names there. So, yeah, how was all that, Michael?
Yeah, it was wild. I was tired, so it's probably taken a week or two to get back on to actually do the debrief because I had to recover. But yeah, it was hectic.
I guess we had a fantastic debrief of the other conference, Bali Blockchain Week that you went to. Some great insights there. So before we get into, I guess, some of the general themes and that as well that we've been focusing our research on, some of the really big names in the space were there talking about the stage of the cycle we're at just for Bitcoin and ETH and what's going to lead the next market cycle with apps and real world adoption. Now we've got some of that scaling. So yeah, take us through all of that.
Yeah, well, I got in on the Monday. The actual event only went for the 2 days, just the Thursday and the Friday. Actually, sorry, Wednesday and the Thursday. But like I was slam solid from the time that we got there. There was so many official side events that were on, so you kind of almost had to like go into a music festival. You had to pick your schedules because you couldn't go to everything. There was stuff that would overlap, and then there'd be competing interests of who was going where to what event, and
Yeah.
and people even during the week were trying to coax people to come to their event, and so yeah, planned out the schedule, and I was knackered before we even got to the main event, just from all of the pre stuff that we'd been to. But you can see that the competition is alive and well. So yeah, I guess we probably start off talking about some of the big boys that were there. The only ones that really didn't have like a formal presence was like anyone from like the Ethereum Foundation, but all of the L2s were really strongly represented. Um, and they all like are starting to really try and ramp up and compete for market share now, which I thought was very interesting. That now the Ethereum space is now being like dictated by the layer twos.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And prior to the actual event starting, I spent the day at Bitcoin Ordinals conference. So they had a full day of Bitcoin Ordinals, and really really interesting because this was like their official event. It just happened to be a side event the day before Token 2049, and really starting to hear the Bitcoin maxi position, but not from a traditional sort of like, we only want Bitcoin to be store of value. We only want Bitcoin to just be for payments. That's it. This is like Bitcoin maxis, but they're almost trying to turn Bitcoin into Ethereum, essentially. There's this whole new cohort of Bitcoiners that really want smart contracts, that really want like tokens, that want NFTs, that want functionality. And so that was really eye opening to have a whole day conference at a really flash hotel, massive crowd there, and everyone who's building like apps and infrastructure on Bitcoin, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's almost within that Bitcoin maxi community that's now become divided. Or I was reading a piece saying how Bitcoin's almost forked its ideals without forking the chain itself, because there's a group of people that only want hard money and very few changes, and there's other people now talking about side chains and side dapps, drive chains, all these things that can be built on Bitcoin or on the Lightning Network, just to give it as many variants as possible of what it can do. So, I mean, we've heard about stamps and ordinals and some of these, I guess, collectibles, NFTs and the like. What was the sort of things you heard or any projects? Because I know we've discussed things like stable coins on Bitcoin layer 2. So that's already interesting that you've said there's a lot of ETH layer 2s, but then also this Bitcoin community talking about, well, their layer 2s and side chains and what else can be done.
Yeah, there's like this, and you see it. Like I watch all the conferences and the talks from the main Bitcoin conference over in the States every year, and you can see their theory is that the whole world will be based on Bitcoin and all stable coins will be pegged to Bitcoin, and there's almost like this assumption in the Bitcoin community that the second that stable coins come to Bitcoin, then that's it. That's game over for Ethereum. They think that everything now will be on Bitcoin, which I don't know if that's actually. Well, I don't believe that, but I think that that is a massive use case, and they were actively talking about how exactly what you've just said. How even within the maxi community now they're now dividing, because there's people who want functionality on Bitcoin and there's people who don't. Um, so really interesting day. I left probably more confused about where the future for Bitcoin is, um, than I did when I walked in, because now there's this whole new generation and community of people who are trying to take Bitcoin a direction that we've all come to accept it as, store of value, digital gold. And I firmly believe that as that ETF gets picked up, that, Bitcoin rockets. But it'll be very interesting to see in what way it gets taken and how that block space is going to be used.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll just keep our finger on the pulse and see if we start to see the technology itself be capable of that, and if we start to see total value locked grow and the value of stablecoins on Bitcoin grow, we've got to be open-minded to things like that. But I still think it's a long way away, and that it's going to be a smaller market share compared to how huge the ETH ecosystem and what's already happening there has kind of grown in the number of developers and so on. I think that's just a huge force that people can only maybe take a close second from rather than overtaking that, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, the other main side event that I went to outside of the actual, there's two others. The other main one that I went to before the event was Polygon had a bit of an invite-only side event, and that was run by their Singapore hub, their main business development team in Singapore. And I met the whole founding team of Polygon. And so they all randomly showed up, and they had all the empty chairs ready to go, and we were running 45 minutes late waiting for this speaker, and then the whole founding team all walks in. And so I was sitting in the front row, and I thought, oh, well, this is kind of surreal a little bit. You watch these guys on YouTube so often, and just talking from the Polygon perspective, because all these people that were there had been there as invite only, and I got invited because of our presence in Indonesia, the main business development team. And yeah, just hearing from the Polygon perspective, because they've had a couple of really big announcements with like other chains now deciding to build inside the Polygon ecosystem. So Astar, the biggest parachain in Polkadot, has decided to build a Polygon ZK EVM, and one of the Cosmos chains has decided to come over and build a layer 2 in Ethereum as well, all using that Polygon tech stack. And so as with the Polygon 2.0 initiative, they've essentially built the same architecture as what Polkadot was doing, as what Cosmos was doing, and as what Avalanche was trying to do with their subnets, that they now are this interoperable layer that will connect all of these different blockchains, but use the security of the Ethereum base chain. And I got me pretty bullish on Polkadot, to be honest. I really think that they've been very smart. Their business development team is really strong. They've announced that Grab is integrating a Polygon wallet, which is, for those that don't know, Grab in Asia is like Uber on steroids. You can do everything on Grab. You can order someone to go to the servo for you and buy stuff. You can get food delivered. You can get driven somewhere. And the fact that they're using Polygon tech, like their business development team is outrageous.
So it's got you super bullish on Polygon. You said Polkadot.
Sorry, Polygon.
Yeah,
Polygon.
No worries.
Polygon. Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so moving on, what were the other best projects you saw, or things that surprised you from the talks from other layer 2s? Is it just that general feeling that technology is ready for just that killer use case, and once people start to see the best apps with real users showing up, that's kind of the next phase of the cycle after years of promising that we can get there?
Yeah, you can see the narrative. Like everybody was talking and saying, guys, this is the biggest conference we've ever had, and it's bear market. And so it goes to show that the builders have not stopped building. And like for those that were around for the last cycle, in 2020, we're sitting in a bear market, and there still wasn't like DeFi. There still wasn't, like at the start of 2020, there still wasn't, like Uniswap wasn't an everyday used app. Like I remember getting in Synthetics quite early because I heard about it in the Nuggets news community. And, this was my first foray into using a DeFi app. And now fast forward 3 years later, the technology has become so much more advanced that the narrative that everyone's trying to talk about now is that infrastructure has been built. Ethereum is dominant. And there are some other niche use cases for alt L1s which exist, and they exist for a particular reason. But Ethereum is the undisputed dominant chain, smart contract chain. And that now we're waiting for the killer apps. And I think some of the real interesting like presentations, I listen to people like Balaji and the Winklevoss twins and all of these different founders from different protocols, all talking about how in the App Store on Google or iOS, it's normally like 1 out of every 10,000 apps becomes viral. And we don't even have 10,000 apps in blockchain yet. So all it's going to take is one or three absolute mainstream apps, and all of a sudden everyone's going to be like, well, of course blockchain is the technology behind it, but it's now apps that will onboard the people. That was the main narrative everyone's talking about.
Yeah, we've probably had 10,000 ideas or 10,000 projects, but we don't have 10,000, I guess, working dapps that have a decent amount of users for it to even take off or go viral. But it's like I said, it's the technology's finally to that point where if we do get it, it can take off. So the best, I guess, themes that we've been talking about is gaming. Real world assets is one that we covered pretty early. It's really starting to take off. DeFi and Bitcoin we've already touched on. The liquid staking derivatives in now with interest rates so much higher, interest-bearing stablecoins themselves. So is there anything in that field, or is there a topic, a theme that I've missed that you're really bullish on that had a good talk?
Now, gaming's the big one. All of the different games had booths everywhere. And so the way that the conference had structured it is that all the big boys were on the top deck, which is where the main stage was. And anyone who was like an up-and-coming project was in kind of like the main hall. And so if you think about any time for those in Australia that you've gone to like the Royal Show and you go into the Showbag Pavilion, it was just like, it was wild. And there's all of these different games that are running demos. There's actual full operational video games. And so a lot of this stuff, I think will become more used once one of the existing big game studios starts to get a little worried that some of these smaller studios using blockchain are creeping up on them. And then they'll then be the ones that actually launch it. So I'll be watching for places like the Epic Store, which I think has given the green light now to NFTs being allowed on Epic Games. And so as soon as one mainstream game actually uses NFTs, and then now everyone's got a wallet and they've realized how to use a wallet, there's actually going to be like 50 to 100 other games that they will then be able to go and explore and think, oh, wow, there's a whole ecosystem of NFT games here. We just need somebody to like red pill the NFT community. Or the video game community rather, into NFT games.
Yeah, and that can happen pretty quickly with even a buyout. These gaming companies that are making good profits and have plenty of users and eyeballs already, they can buy out one of these crypto blockchain based games and quickly incorporate it on the back end. We've already seen that a little bit, where players don't have to necessarily familiarize themselves with the MetaMask or their own private keys or whatever. So again, that's probably an area that doesn't have to be fully decentralized at every level for players to still get the benefits of owning their in-game items and being able to use it between different games and all those things we've spoken about in the gaming world.
Yeah, the one that we probably haven't talked about a bit is Astar, who are building the layer 2 on Ethereum using the Polygon tech stack. They are already the biggest parachain in Polkadot. And the software company behind Astar is in partnership now with Sony to build a blockchain specifically for Sony. And so if Sony's the one that then decides, okay, we're now going to integrate all of the Sony services, including PlayStation, well, away we go. And they've tapped Astar, who is, for those, they're probably quite unheard of in a lot of Western markets, but they're probably the second biggest chain used in Japan. Because they're a Japanese chain. They integrated a lot of Japanese businesses already. Their seed round funding was gobbled up by Sony and Mitsubishi and all these other Japanese brands. And so there's a lot of real country pride in the Astar brand, which is why Sony's gone and built with them. And so their founder was there on stage announcing what they're doing with Sony. Sony had a booth there with Astar saying, we're going to, build together. And so I don't think this necessarily, before anyone goes and FOMOs into the Astar token, I don't think that they're connected. I think it's just like the tech company that's built Astar is also going to build the Sony chain. But Startail is the name of their company. So watch that space because there is a Sony chain coming. They were pumping it pretty hard. And who knows, that could be the avenue into Web3 gaming through PlayStation. Watch this space, I think.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear, and one you've done a couple of write-ups on for us as well, so thanks for that. Anything else in particular you want to mention we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, so listening to some of the speakers, I think it's always really interesting when you hear from some of the OGs in the space. And so having a mental blank right now. Bixmex, Arthur Hayes. Yeah, so Bixmex fan, Arthur Hayes. He was very entertaining. So pretty much just came on and spoke and just said from day one, and he had one of the most full talks. And from day one gets up there and says, all right, I'm here to shill my bags. And and super transparent. He's like, I hope that you buy everything that I've got. And ran this whole narrative about how this next bull market will be the biggest one that we've ever seen, but the crash after it will be the biggest crash we've ever seen. And he thinks that this bull market will run all the way through to the end of 25. And it'll be AI driven because everyone's trying to integrate AI. Because at the moment in the world that he lives in, is that VCs are throwing money at anything that's touching AI and they're not even asking questions. And that if governments try and shut down AI, the main thing that AI units will need is decentralized cloud storage, which is why he's there to shield Filecoin. And and then actively talked about it for the next like 45 minutes about why a Filecoin is the best purchase in the world and how it's 95% down, but it's absolutely going to get used and how everyone should go buy it. And so he was very entertaining, really interesting to hear his use case, had lots of great data on why there's big money coming and why this next bull market is going to be something like we've never seen before. Using the analogy of we've never had money printing and technology advancement at the same time in a bull market. It's always been one or the other. And so if we get money printing and an AI technology narrative, then it'll be rocket fuel. That's the Arthur Hayes synopsis.
Yeah, I guess before even AI fully took off, I think it was 12 or 18 months ago, I did a post and write up about decentralized infrastructure itself and projects like Arweave with permanent file storage or even the Filecoin alternatives, Storage, CR. I haven't even checked on where they're going lately, but I guess anything in that space could become part of that bullish theme when we see a narrative take off, and people are going to be looking to that. So that's interesting to hear from him as well. Decentralized computing power, storage, all that sort of thing. Absolutely, if data and AI continues to be key themes in the broader tech environment.
The last one, probably, I think that's worth mentioning as well, is the Chainlink narrative. So Chainlink was there, and essentially, for those that haven't researched it, the CCIP, the Chainlink Cross Communication Protocol, I think that's going to do some big things as well. It's essentially going to make all separate siloed blockchains interoperable, and that Chainlink will be that layer in between. And we've already got that in some cases. Like you can go and use Thorchain, and you can make swaps between Bitcoin and Ethereum without a centralized exchange in the middle. But there's a chain that sits in the middle where Chainlink is trying to be this network that of using oracles where they're going to be able to connect everything together. And essentially we end up in a multi-chain world where the user can be using a wallet and has no idea what chain they're using because Chainlink has just sewn all of these blockchains together. So they've been very cagey on how that affects the Link token at this stage, but they're dropping all these hints on Twitter, like you can be able to pay for everything in whatever token, and Link will be the gas that fuels it all. But I pay attention to especially Chainlink's cryptic Twitter releases because if they're successful in doing that, then you can imagine how interesting that gets. That all blockchains now become one internet. That they're no longer fragmented anymore. If they can pull that off.
Yeah, if they can pull it off, obviously that's awesome. And if someone is in the know or has an expert on Chainlink that's up to date with all this, I'd love to have them on to interview them because that's always been the question for me. How does the Link token come into it? And it kind of reminds me a little bit how an XRP used to say, oh, it's going to be the settlement layer for everything and everything will have to use XRP. And that just never eventuated either. So, yeah, but I think the technology itself has already become integral to so many chains, even little old handle Finance Forex we covered the other day. All these projects with price-based things need these oracles. So maybe they start charging, or you have to hold a certain amount of Link for the services, or percentage of trade volumes you're doing, total value lock. So yeah, I'm sure there's a bullish path for that Link token, but it's great to see they're doing well. And I think, did you see yesterday they partnered with ANZ, Australian New Zealand Bank?
Yeah. They're running a pilot program and using stable coins and. Yeah, really interesting that like someone like ANZ is using that technology in the middle of all other Australian banks blocking exchange access. So I don't know what's going on in the world sometimes.
Yeah. Keep going, mate. Anything else we haven't touched on yet? This is a great insight.
Yeah, I got to do a tour of the OKX office and I cannot believe what I saw in there. You just imagine like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory of blockchain. They just had floors and floors of people who are just out in communities like the Nuggets news community, and they're out just trying to like shill the OKX platform. And so the amount of money that these exchanges, and I don't know what OKX sits in the rankings of exchanges, I imagine they're top 10, but probably not near the top 3. The amount of people and manpower, there had to be 500 people on this, like multi floors in one of the Singapore sky rises. And they've got an F1 car in there. And, I'm bumping into a guy from Coin Bureaus in there. And all of the crypto banter guys are all in there. And all these influencers are all in the room getting this tour at the same time. And they're just throwing money around at advertising with like Premier League football teams and Formula One. And like I think that their lunch probably still gets eaten by DeFi eventually, but it goes to show that just the power of exchanges and that we have decentralized away from Binance being the single choke point. I don't think that if anything was to happen to Binance in the future, I don't think that that's going to be catastrophic because there's these big behemoths like Bybit and OKX and all these other big exchanges who still obviously are making a lot of money. So it was crazy to see just how well resourced and well stocked they are, and they're like the nicest, most futuristic offices you've ever seen. I was pretty blown away by that.
Yeah, it's definitely got a bull market feel to it, doesn't it? With the number of employees and staff and money being spent and all that. So it's good to see that happening in the midst of a bear market. I think everyone feels now that this has been the longest bear market that things have to turn soon. Whether or not they play out exactly like history has and repeat, or like other Hayes said, the biggest one before the biggest dump. But yeah, it just feels like, particularly to me, in the East and all these other countries, just the resentment towards US regulations, US dollar is growing. So that's just such a huge opportunity, population wise and decentralized workforce wise. All those things that can really take off faster in those other countries than in the West.
Yeah, the last probably narrative that I took away from the week as well that we haven't touched on is that it's undisputedly accepted that Asia will lead the next bull market as well. And that while the US still squabble over regulations and is Gary going to do this, is Gary going to do that, Japan is actively pushing for blockchain to be implemented. Korea is very willing to welcome blockchain companies, even though they've still got some very strict regulations around it. Like Immutable X, Robbie from Immutable X was there talking about how, it's incredible the amount of game developers that are now building in the space and housing themselves in East Asia. China clearly is sending mixed messages where they ban it publicly, but yet welcoming businesses and throwing crazy amounts of money. And then Southeast Asia is just the sheer number of people, and that's obviously something that's close to my heart because I'm based in Bali in Indonesia for most of the time, and I see what's going on there. And it's just going to be a numbers game where if you talk about a project that's looking for active users, they're no one short of active users across Southeast Asia. So there's money and there's manpower and there's users and there's customers all throughout Asia. It's got the full network. So watch this space in Asia. I'd say that's where it's going to come from.
That could be something that turns it into a super cycle with the sort of the macro backdrop. If the traditional economy is kind of stalling and with these higher rates and we're not really into a boom, and then this little sector of tech and DeFi and AI sort of all intertwined is really starting to take off, and we're seeing these true numbers growing in these smaller countries, developing countries, and then it gets a bit of competitiveness happening between Russia and China, and the US is trying to get those new, more welcoming regulations and senators and whatever in place. That's when it could really turn into a super cycle over the next couple of years, when everyone says, hey, we want this tech and this money here, the floodgates are open, and then we get the next bubble burst and a real crackdown on it. And
Yeah, I think just from a personal position, like how I want to position myself for this market too, because we all, sitting around talking with everybody at these events are pretty deep into the ecosystem already. That's why they're there in a bull market. And everyone's talking like we're all trying to find the best piece of wood, make a perfect surfboard, find the perfect surf break so that we can be in the right position for the next wave. That's kind of what everybody's doing right now. And I think for me, squabbling over which is going to be the best L1, is it going to be Cardano or is it going to be Solana, or who's going to be the ETH killer, or is Sui and Aptos going to be the Solana killer? I think some of those things are a bit boring now. I think most portfolios and everybody that I've talked to it's Ethereum and Bitcoin. Like that's where you should have most of your asset allocation, not financial advice, but that's what everyone's saying. And then you start going out on the risk curve. And I think most people are looking on the risk curve now for what the next application will be. So you're really big into the Solana ecosystem, like knock yourself out, um, because there's obviously going to be a few X's available in some of these other ecosystems, but some of the big moves are going to be in the application level, and that's what everyone's talking about now. So, yeah, position yourself accordingly. Do your own research.
Yeah, it almost feels like we're to the point now where talking about what chain is going to be the winner and all that. It's like devs squabbling about, well, what type of language are you using to program your game or whatever, but it just doesn't matter when people in the real world are playing your game and all that type of thing. So it's going to be about the end user and whatnot. So that's been great, Michael. Any final thoughts to wrap up?
Nah, I'm ready to get some rest, and then we'll see what comes next. And but yeah, it's fun being on the front line, and we try and write up as much as we can from all the interesting projects in the Nuggets News community. So anything that's been worthwhile chatting about, we have either written a report on or it's coming. So do you want more detailed information on everything that we've seen? We've had a big team out in the front line, and so there'll be full written reports on everything on the platform.
Yeah, fantastic. And we're still offering that lifetime membership special over at the website, guys, with all the links below. So, yeah, awesome insight as always, Michael. And we'll do this regularly as we always do. So, talk to you again soon.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.